Hello and welcome to the 6th Annual Global Demand Awards, recognizing the most in-demand TV series, movies, and talent. We're joined today by Scott Kraft. He's a two-time Emmy winner and the writer, story editor, and executive producer of Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol is not only one of the most in-demand kids shows in the world, but it's also a massive business, accounting for over $14 billion in sales since 2014. Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
All right, let's dive in. So you've certainly got one of the more eclectic IMDb pages out there. You're definitely a multi-hyphenate before it was cool. So tell us how someone goes from penning R-rated action thrillers to acting alongside Russell Crowe to eventually writing and developing some of the most iconic children's series of all time.
I don't really have any idea how it happened, actually. It just sort of happened. The all of the writing stuff was planned. The acting stuff was completely accidental. I never planned to be an actor. I never actually kind of realized it was a job, I don't think, growing up. I had always planned to be a writer. I was working at a news radio station in Philadelphia. I thought I was going to be like a producer for CNN or something. I was going to be like Wolf Blitzer's writer producer, doing, traveling the world and doing exciting political stories. I was studying political science. And somebody at the radio station also worked for a videographer who was doing a commercial, and they're like, you should go and talk to them. And of course, as only an idiot who knows nothing about anything can do, I got the job. I ended up doing commercial, getting residuals all summer. I was like, this is the easiest thing ever. I'm going to be a millionaire in no time, and I can write my novels and live on an island. And, of course, at the same time, I started getting into studying a little bit of playwriting and plays, more from the literature side. I switched to an English major. And the combination of going to New York to get into the theater scene and then also kind of kicking around the acting a little bit. The acting sort of became my day job, weirdly enough. It financed my writing habit. You sit around a lot when if you manage to get an acting job, you spend a ton of time sitting around doing nothing. So it's great. It's great for writing. And it was great to sit behind the camera and watch people work. So I kept it going for a while, but I wasn't particularly great at it, really, the acting side. Writing was what I always wanted to do and always was doing, even while I was acting. And so eventually I shifted back full time to the writing, or at least primarily to the writing. The Silencer, which is the movie that you mentioned, a really, really talented director, friend of my wife's, got hired to make the movie, and she needed somebody to kind of help her get the story going, and we ended up just writing the whole thing together, and then I helped her produce it while she shot it. It was super stylish, and she did a great job with the money that she was given, and that went on to lead to a couple of TV deals, TV pilots at HBO and CBS and a couple other places. We did a movie together. We wrote a movie together for Polygram. And so that just sort of, for the longest time, I just did your regular writing freelance career. And then my wife and I, Nadine Vanderveld, who also does a lot of kids these days. And we've worked together on a number of things. We created the Fresh Beat Band together, and she was the first EP story editor on Roly Poly Oly. We had a kid, and she in particular thought she was ready to go back to being on the floor and doing live action. We were doing grown-up hour TV at the time. And we had a low-budget art film that we had put together with the director, Amy Goldstein, and some friends. And it's the kind of thing where everybody had to do everything. It was super low budget, just something we really wanted to do for fun. And with an 8-month-old kid and being on the floor 18 hours a day, she realized that was not a life for her. And she had been offered Roly Poly Oly because she had done some work with Nirvana before. And when she met Bill Joyce, she just fell in love with him. And she was like, okay, I'll try this. It lets me stay home. And then they overwhelmed her with work. They doubled the order. And she was like, you have to help me. And it turned out I loved it. It was great. It was really, and I had no interest in doing animation particularly. I mean, I didn't dislike it. I just had no ambition for it. I had no particular ambition for writing for kids. But then all of a sudden we had a kid and we were watching her play, and we were watching her imagination, we were watching how she interacted with other kids, and she was just giving us stories like every day. So it was easy as could be. We just stole right out of her life, and so it turned out to be really really fun. And then a couple of years in, she was at preschool, and they asked everybody what their parents did, and she said, "My parents tell Rolly what to say." And I was like, you know what? That's okay. That can be on my tombstone. I can live with that epithet. So that's kind of what happened. And it's the thing about writing for animation, weirdly enough, is the writer is. I mean, in television, the writer's king anyway, but writing for animation, the writer really is king, especially if you're going to be sitting in on the records, and if you're going to be helping put together the radio play. Every word is yours, if you want it to be. And that's a really enjoyable place to be as a writer. And it's a lot of fun. So that's how I got there. The Russell Crowes of it all, that was my day job, weirdly enough. That was my barista job.
Not a bad barista job. So what I got from that is say yes to everything and steal from your kids, and you'll
Yes,
great. Yeah.
100, say yes to everything is absolutely the answer. No doubt about it. And yeah, if you have kids and you have a good chance to steal from them, do that. Yes.
Yeah, and I actually I did watch Roll Polioli with my sister growing up, so that's pretty cool to see the wizard behind the curtain right now. But yeah, with that show, and I guess also Paw Patrol, it seems like that was sort of on at the time at least like the cutting edge of the animation
Yeah.
technology. So can you just talk about I guess the role that kind of technology has played with kids content over the last couple decades?
Yeah, it's really challenging, unfortunately. Like, Pixar and DreamWorks ruined it for everybody because everything's got to look beautiful and 3D and CGI, but it's a really restrictive technology for storytelling. 2D is much, much more generous in as far as just simple things like assets and backgrounds. And, on Roly Poly we couldn't, for the first couple of shows, and maybe even the first season, you couldn't pick up a prop on camera because they didn't have that technology yet. So you would pick up a fork out here, we couldn't open a closet. It'd be like, oh, what's in the closet? We can't build a closet, and then of course the technology gets better and better, but they're always chasing these multi-million-dollar beautiful features that are being made, and you want to get a clothing change on somebody, you want to put glasses on a dog. It's like, ooh, we can't afford to put glasses. You're like, come on, that's animation comedy. It's the whole point of animation. So it can be a real challenge. 2D is way more forgiving, especially for comedy. I think that's why you see, shows like Peppa and Bluey and SpongeBob, obviously, and Adventure Time and shows like that get to be more absurdist and more wild, whereas the shows that go CG tend to be a little bit more straight action. You get the Paw, you get the PJ Masks, and then even with Paw, there was a strong choice to go sort of plasticine in the design, which helps a ton. If you start getting into fur and you start getting into moving fabrics and things like that, it just kills you. And nobody has the budget to do that properly at a 52 11 minutes in a 18-month cycle. It's just too challenging.
Yeah, that sounds I never thought about that. And because I did want to ask basically how the technology impacts sort of the creative decisions and everything, but you kind of got into that. But could you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it just really is, how things are built. Now they're starting to work in game engines like Unreal and things like that, but you still have to, in CGI and 3D, you still have to build the world. It's actually much more like live action. I think one of the reasons that Nadine and I were successful early on is we understood CGI as being very similar to a live action show. You build a set. You're building the set inside your computer, but you still have to build that set. Whereas, 2D is you're just laying things on top of each other. So, if you need a mountain, somebody can go out and paint a mountain, you can slide it in. In CGI, if you want to go to a mountain, you actually want to interact with that mountain. You're essentially got to build that location, and it's not even like live action where you can just take everybody to a mountain, you have to actually build it in the computer, and it's quite challenging from a budgetary standpoint of what you get as a writer. When you're an EP writer on a show, you're limited by the assets that they can afford, and you start at the beginning and you kind of agree to these certain restrictions, and they're always too restrictive, and everybody wants more, always, including me. I always want more, so it's a constant battle. But it also, what it does allow is, I think, for realistic shows to feel like the characters are real and alive. So I think for Paw, it was really good for that. Felt like those pups were really a part of your imaginary play coming to life. I think that for things like Bluey and Peppa, you can just do a lot more. Um, it's more an imaginary world completely that's different from yours, whereas Paw, it's more like those pups came into your actual world, I think, a little bit. And it's like your play set came to life a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
And so yeah, speaking of which, like I wanted to talk about, the DNA of a good kids show. I would certainly say, between Paw Patrol, Blue's Clues, and Bluey, is it more than just puppy dog eyes?
I mean, there is a reason that there are a lot of dog shows and cat shows, and they do well. And it's, we've spent thousands of years breeding dogs and cats to be attractive to humans. You know what I mean? And that's not like an accident. That's been intentional. So yes, it's a lot easier to start with pups than it is to start with the spiders, or there's what is the show, Lucas or Luca, and it's a beautiful, very hairy spider, and it's an amazing that they can make that an attractive show. Humans have a natural adverse reaction to spiders, but there is a reason that pups and cats and cute babies, that they dominate the visual landscape. But there's a lot that has to go into a successful show. And mostly once you have a good idea, it's about nobody screwing it up at every stage. And it's very hard to get that team and for the timing to be right. The timing just has to be right. I mean, everyone talks about Peppa as if it's an overnight success. It's going to be 20 years old in May. Peppa will have debuted 20 years ago this May, and it took years for it to come along. And it took an incredible executive producer who ran it around. It hit American TV twice. It came out first under Turner when they were doing the Tickle You, and it just never caught on. They had re-recorded all the voices in American, and then Noggin put it on. Terry Weiss grabbed it for Nick and Noggin with the original voices, and then it really caught traction. Why 3 years later did it catch with different voices? It's impossible to say. It's a great show, and it's people who believed in it, and they pushed it, and they stayed with it. And I think Bluey, nobody would have predicted a fun little 2D show out of Australia, with a bunch of dogs kind of having a very real kid adult interaction and really like a true slice of life show would be the next huge success either, and that's because the guy who does it has a really strong point of view. He believes in it, and the BBC and Disney are juggernauts that are able to take what's popular with it and put it out everywhere. Cocomelon, I mean, it was on for years on YouTube before it finally landed on television, and so it has a huge base of support. And they've done obviously a lot of real time research on it, because they get to see what works on YouTube and they get immediate feedback.
For sure. I did want to talk about one thing when it comes to, I guess, creating the kids shows versus others. I think there's a major difference is you kind of have to get over a huge gatekeeper, which would be parents. So how do you effectively write to two different audiences at once, or is that how you approach it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, You don't write, or I don't know, I don't, and I don't know anyone who writes kids shows to make them unappealing. You know what I mean? You're not making kids murder mysteries or, slasher films or Shameless, with kids. I mean, it's just you only last in kids, I think, and you only are in there if you believe that you want to tell fun, nice, positive, upbeat, interesting stories to kids. So that solves most of the parent problem right there. Parents want to feel like they've put their kids in front of something that's positive and uplifting and maybe a little encouraging and entertaining and keeps them occupied for 22 minutes while they get to shower, or whatever. So yes, there is what they talk about. There's the consumer and there's the audience, and they're in a weird way two different things. But and more and more they're converging. Parents are more and more, and this has been across my career. They're more and more just handing the iPad or the phone to the kid, and the kid now knows how to swipe tiles and it knows how to hit the one it likes, and the same with YouTube. So it's not that much of a challenge. I wrote as a dad, and I always write as a dad, and that is like I write for stuff that I try to write stuff that I would want to sit down and, if not actively watch with my kid, at least endure with my kid, and that's so that is how I come to it as a attempted family viewing for the most part.
Yeah. Makes sense. I guess my kid's slasher script will have to be put on
There's a
tape
place
for a
for it.
while.
The market has really a lot more lanes now, so
Yeah, yeah.
it's
So yeah, I want to talk a little bit more. Let's move on to Paw Patrol specifically. So
sure.
the backstory is really cool. I know it involves, like a t Canadian toy company as well as the creator of Bob the Builder got involved. But can you talk about how it all came together and then how you got involved?
I mean, as far as what I know from previous to me arriving is just stuff that I've sort of heard out there is, Ronan, who was at Spin, really wanted a transformation type toy for preschoolers. He felt like there was a real white space there. And and Keith Chapman, who did Bob the Builder and was creator of Paw Patrol, worked with Jen Dodge, who's executive at Spin, and they came up with this idea somehow of he had, I think they were older rescue dogs in the beginning, and he wasn't named Ryder at first. He was named Robbie, and he rescued these older dogs, and they went out and they then rescued the community. And then I think, as far as I was told, I think Terry Weiss, who's executive at Nick at the time, she was head of Nick Preschool. She's over at DreamWorks now, doing Gabby's Dollhouse. But she and Jen and Keith, I think, with Terry's impetus, made them pups, and then they sort of they had some of the characters and they had the beginning idea, and then they brought me in to create sort of the franchise of it, what the week to week to week story is going to be, how it would structure, how it would be put together. We changed some of the characters. We worked with toy quite a bit. Spin obviously had a really strong toy design team, and they were quite involved in certain aspects of the design and certain things that requirements they had, or certainly asks they had to be in the show. And then I did what I do, which is basically build a week to week a structure that will work week to week, and a kind of scaffolding that allows familiarity with the characters. Kids like a certain rhythm. They like a certain, like, not just kids, everybody, if you watch any of the NCISs, they all have the same rhythm. They all, it doesn't matter what town they're putting them in. People with television like that familiarity. And that's what I really come in and do. And I create a sort of a structure that allows these characters and forms the characters in a way that they need to be formed, so that they can do something really fun and hopefully engaging and exciting every 11 minutes, every twice a half hour, back then it was every week. Now who knows how things roll out, but it was actually still a linear rollout back when it first came out.
All right. So and then it's obviously been a huge success. So I'll rattle off some Parrot analytics data about the show. So Basically, since the mid 2010s, Paw Patrol has been the top one, between number one and number three children's show worldwide. The others being Peppa Pig and actually Masha and the Bear. But just since the beginning of 2020, Paw Patrol has averaged 36 times more demand than the average show worldwide. So it's not just a top kids show, but it's actually in the top 0.2% of all series across all platforms worldwide. So first, and be honest, did you ever expect Paw Patrol to ever become this popular around the world?
No, I mean, and honestly, I don't ever really kind of think in those terms. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous level of. I hope it gets picked up for the second season. I hope that I hope the network feels good about it. I hope the kids like it. First and foremost, I just hope the kids like it. So no, I never imagined it would be this successful and long. That's
And
for
then
sure.
was there a particular moment where you thought, oh, we might have something on our hands, whether it was production or, seeing fan reaction, something like that?
I mean, it was a very fast and steady build, but there was not like a nuclear moment. There was, it rolled out. The numbers were really good right off the bat for Nick, so people were super excited about that as always. But they didn't have a toy launch for a year, so they had to really ramp that up very quickly. And the thing about kids television is, particularly younger kids television, is your economics have to work on the non-licensing side, merchandising usually, but it can be like with the Fresh Beat Band, we had a really good music and touring side to it. So that helped. You have to have revenue streams to get boring and businessy about it outside of just your licensing to be really a big hit, to be to get people to be what's called a home run. And you need licensing, and you need product licensing as well as just uh, 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 episodic licensing. So what really wasn't until the toys rolled out. Now, everybody was pretty confident once the numbers were coming in, and because Spin, if they know how to do anything, they're brilliant at rolling out a toy line. And they did an amazing job, and they had a great plan in place. And so, it became pretty clear by season two that it was hitting. I mean, I don't think I ever even let my mind wander to how far or how long it would go. But it was just like the other thing is when you're when you're making a series, you're underwater all the time. You are always late. You're always out of time. You're always out of money. You are always, so you don't really have a lot of time to sit in the backyard, stretch out and go, I wonder how many years this is gonna run. You're really like, oh, I got to get this draft out by midnight so I can get to the next one tomorrow at 6. So
Yeah,
um,
one hour at a time mode for sure.
yeah, totally.
So yeah, speaking of merch, I wanted to bring that up. Obviously, that's a big part of the Paw Patrol story. So I saw an article in Variety as of fall 2023, the Paw Patrol has earned 14 billion in merchandising sales. And then if you include box office and home media, Paw Patrol as a franchise has earned as much as James Bond, Peanuts, and The Avengers, which have been around for half a century.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it was, it's a lot of it is just luck and right place at right time. Spin is a brilliant toy company. They really know how to create engagement with kids. Nick is really, especially in preschool, no, and across the board, they know how when they get eyeballs, they know how to keep them coming. We had a really great team on the writing side. I mean, Jamie Whitney, who was doing the directing, incredible, and he and I made a pact very early on just to make the best show that we possibly could. We would service whatever toy asks there were. We would put them in but we would put them in ways that we made sure that it was entertaining and fun. And then Ursula Ziegler Sullivan, who came in after me, she had done a lot of the scripts. She's someone that I've known has worked in kids for a long, long time, really good writer. And so she took over after season two. She took over the main story editing. And then after season four, she took over the EPing as well. And she's super quality and really, really good. And you know, and it spins fantastic and strong. So everybody involved knew how to stay on the horse once it took off, you know, and that's the important thing, is like recognizing that the horse is bolted and figuring out how to stay on top of it is important, is critical. And for me, it was just feeding the beast and keeping it going as good as possible with the asks that we were getting from various places, you know. That's how you know when a show is popping, is when people you never saw suddenly start asking you for stuff. And, you know, and when
Huh.
all of a sudden marketing is asking and promos is asking, and you're like, oh, okay, now things are happening. The machines are huge for those companies, and their quality, you know, the getting the attention. Once you get their attention, it's you know, it can generate a lot of interest. And then it just it connected. I would like to say I know exactly why, but I think it's a lot of things all together at the right time, at the right place, and having to do with technology and having to do with distribution as well, you know, all of those things aligning. So
Yeah, so speaking of distribution, I mean, obviously things have changed a lot since you've started. As a creator, I mean, would you rather see something exclusively on Netflix or like available everywhere, or
I
what's your
mean,
deal?
I want the most eyeballs on anything I'm doing. So I don't care how I truly, you know, if it plays in the back of a van, I don't care. It's, you know, you can't, and also you can't, you know, look, the next thing that people are going to have to figure out, and the next thing that people are going to have to figure out how to break is the metaverse and Roblox and Fortnite. And, you know, how do you storytell on Roblox? That's where the eyeballs are now. You know, they're gone. Once the 7-year-old and above, you know, flat TV is dying like very fast, and people are going to have to figure out, all of us, you know, there's great stories in games right now. There's great stories on television, linear TV, traditional format. There's not really great storytelling in Roblox and Fortnite and those kind of experiential Minecraft. That it's not there yet, but that's where the kids are, and that's where it's going to have to be. And that's the next nut to crack, is
So
and how to move across the spaces. You know, people are going to have to figure out how to go from TikTok to Roblox to Netflix and back to the theater, to movies, to physical toys, all of it. You know, you have to be a 360 story world now.
so are you working on any Roblox shows?
You know what? I would love to crack that nut. I would really, Nadine and I have both been like really looking at that world because it's fascinating, and I find it really interesting. I don't have anything specific yet, but we are definitely looking at like how do you import a narrative to that world that's engaging and imaginative. You know, that's sorry. That is definitely the next step, is figuring those, you know, as soon as they get the augmented reality really hits your phone, you know, and how do you start storytelling in, you know, in formats even like Pokemon Go, or those kind of multiplay cross-platform interactions. And I think it's really interesting. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea what the answer is, but I find it fascinating.
No, and I know, like, just anecdotally, you know, between friends' kids and my sister's kids, like the preschoolers, it seems like they don't even say like let's watch TV. They say like, oh, I want to watch YouTube, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's already
YouTube.
changed so much.
Yeah. YouTube is the biggest streamer right now,
Yeah,
you
for sure.
know,
Oh, for sure.
and that's
Yeah, we got time for one or two more. You did talk
cool.
about, yeah, obviously, I can tell you're well aware of the other shows out there besides Paw Patrol for preschoolers.
Sure.
But is there any like rivalry, or does like a rising tide lift all boats, or what do you,
Yeah.
how does that go?
I mean, there's no time really for you know, if you're working, you're doing the best you can, and if you're not working, you're developing the next thing, and you're looking at what's successful, and you're being impressed by them usually, and like, oh man, I wish I'd thought of that.
Right.
Generally, it's more like, oh, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? I thought, yeah. So that's, you look at Bluey and you just go, that's just such a unique, beautiful voice that he has, and it's so of itself that it can break out, because it's not designed to break out in the traditional. It wasn't built in a lab, it was built in a guy's head, and that's you can't help but applaud that. I couldn't do Bluey if I was being dangled out of a plane by my ankles. It's like that's just a Peppa, the same thing. That's just a couple people's beautiful vision that they've just put in their heart and their soul into it, and you can feel it and you can tell, and that's so no, not really. I think the more good kids programming, the better is my motto.
Sweet. Well, I think we'll end it there. Scott Kraft of Paw Patrol. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. Great to meet you.